So let's get real close here. That way everybody can see. If anybody has a hard time seeing, I want you all to be able to come up closer. That way you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have our bowl of curd that's surrounded by some water. So the first thing I'm going to do is just going to take my container and I'm going to drain out the water here. Make sure you're not losing any of your curd. Thank you.
Don't lose the curd.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, so now I have my curd. So what I'm going to do is, I like my mozzarella slightly salted, so it's basically no salt versus slightly salted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my kosher salt here, and I'm just going to sprinkle it pretty liberally right on top.
Suppose you're conservative.
If you're conservative and you don't prefer it to be a little bit salty, what you can do is you can take a 5-finger pinch of some of the salt and you can put it right into your brine, and that's going to just coat the surface of your cheese if you prefer not to salt the curd itself. So you can do either one. Great question. So like I said, if you're salt conservative, just toss a little bit into your water and that's going to be your little salt brine where you're going to keep your mozzarella. So next thing you're going to do, if you salted your curd, or even if you didn't, you just want to break up the curd so that they're all separate. I'm just going to mix mine all up together here. And now the water that I have right here in this pitcher is about 180 degrees. That's really, really hot water. So just to give you perspective, 212 is boiling. So 180 degrees is like, oh, really hot bath water where you stick your toe in and you're like, hey, that's pretty good. Whoa, that's hotter than I anticipated. So do remember to act gingerly when you're working with this water. One recommendation that I have when working with it, and you'll see, I'm going to pour it, you know what, I'll just do it as we go. I'm going to pour in the hot water. One thing to keep in mind, don't pour it directly on top of your curd. Pour it so that it's around the curd, so that the water is surrounding it. So when working with the curd like this, what you're going to do is in the next few seconds, while I'm talking to all of you, I'm just going to let all the curds kind of come up to temperature and meet the heat of the water. What you're going to do is you're going to take your fingers and you're going to gently, I should say this in advance, the less you manipulate your cheese, the softer it's going to be, which is what you want. The more you manipulate it, the more you pull it, the more you tug it, the tougher it's going to be. You don't want to end up with a rubber ball, that's for sure. You want to end up with soft, pillowy, delicious mozzarella. So the less manipulation, the better. I like to use, for the most part, just my fingertips. You don't really need to use much of anything else. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take all the curd that's in the bowl right now, and I'm going to gently pull it all over to one side so that it kind of forms a small mass on one side. You don't want it all separate. So I'm going to bring it all separately. And while I'm doing this, as I mentioned, it's really hot, even for me, and I've done this many times before. If you have a hard time touching the water and kind of digging in there, feel free to use your brine as your kind of cooling water and dip back and forth. That way you can cool off your fingers, dip it back in, dip it in like that, totally okay, and it makes it much easier to work with and you don't have to scald your fingers. So what we're going to do here is bring the curd together. Erin, would you mind adding like half a pitcher of cold tap water into that? It's a little bit on the hot side. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the curd that I've brought together and I'm going to let it stretch under its own weight. You're not going to be pulling it like pizza dough, and you're not going to be stringing it left and right. Basically, you're going to let it all do its own work through the heat and the own weight of the curd. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a big lump of this curd here. I'm going to show you how it's starting. Can any of you see that are close by how it's starting to kind of like melt a little bit, right? It's starting to melt. So if you see right here, I'm going to take some of my, can you see how it's starting to stretch under its own weight? Can you all see that? Everybody see that? So what I'm going to do here is, as it's stretching under its own weight, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let it fall right back into the water. I'm just going to take it and gently fold it over once. Notice that I didn't stretch it any more than I had to. I didn't pull it 2 feet up high to the ceiling. That's going to cool off the curd too much. I just let it stretch under its own weight and put it right back into the water. It's key when you're working with mozzarella, as I mentioned, don't over manipulate. That's one of the key points. Also, you want to make sure that you're not letting the water cool too fast, because then it's going to harden. So we want to make sure that we're keeping the curd in the hot water while we're working with it. So I'm going to take this piece, the same piece that I basically started with, and I'm going to let it pull one more time under its own weight. And you'll notice that some of these clumps are kind of, they're still there, they're still in their clump shape. What you can do is you can take it and you can fold it one more time. And see, notice how every time I do it, it's getting smoother and smoother as I go through. So I've reached a point where most of this has pretty much smoothed through. Now see how it's really plasticine and smooth and it's getting very silky and shiny? Can you see that? There's a couple of bumps. What you can do is everybody make scissor hands with their whatever hand they prefer to use. You make scissor hands, and all you have to do is just gently smooth out any of these lumps and bumps that might be in here. So that's actually pretty good. This water is nice and hot, so it's at a really good temperature. What I'm going to do next is you're going to see that you have this sheet right here, right? So you're going to take this very smooth sheet, and very gently you're going to start rolling it up, just like a Pillsbury croissant. You're going to roll it up, roll it up, roll it up. So I'm just going to cut it off right about here. If you have a little extra curd, you can make 1 or 2 balls. You can make little bocconcini. You can make whatever size mozzarella ball you feel comfortable. You can make one big one with all your curd, whatever you prefer. I'm just going to nip it right here. So I have this thing here that looks just like a little roll, like a croissant right here. So what I'm going to do is, if it's a little bit on the lengthy side, like it's a little bit too long, what you can do is just gently just tuck it under on each side. And what you're going to do is you're going to have a smooth surface on top. Do you see how I have this smooth part right here that doesn't have too many lines or any lumps or bumps? What you're going to do is this is going to be your this flat surface is going to be facing the ceiling. Put that into the hand that you write with. With the hand that you do not write with, make an OK sign. Everybody make an OK sign, right? And you're going to make sure that it's very, very tight. Really, really tight like that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that smooth surface right there and you're going to start pushing it through the aperture that is that OK sign. Does that make sense? I'm going to show you so that you can all understand what we're doing here. Okay. So what that is doing is creating that ball shape. Do you all see that?
I'm sure mine's going to be so screwed up, by the way.
Okay, so what I'm doing is on the bottom, do you see how it just looks like a crazy mess? What I'm doing is literally stuffing it into itself. It's all going right into that little ball.
Mozzarella's
Done it a couple times. Okay, so now you can see right on top here that you have this little bulbous little ball right here. There's 2 ways that you can do it. So what I like to do is with your right hand, the hand that you write with, you're going to make a C. Everybody make a C shape. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that C and right underneath this little thing, you're going to go and you're going to go squeeze, 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 and you're not going to pull it up. You're not going to tug it left. You're not going to go diagonally. You're going to go right across. Boom, and that's going to cut it off, okay? So you might have a little tail of mozzarella, and when you pull this off, you might see that you have a little tail right here. All you're going to do is just very gingerly tuck that right underneath it. There is your fresh ball of mozzarella. So that's going to be your mozzarella right there. Would anybody like me to do that one more time? Just